Good morning, afternoon, evening, or middle of the night, whenever you've decided to sit down and watch this. And welcome to the Excellence in Legal Research course on evaluating your research. If you don't already know me, I'm Professor Hinojosa, and before we jump in, I want to set a couple of expectations about what the course is going to look like today. So this one is probably going to end up as a bit shorter than normal because we're not going to be doing an in-class exercise today. Crazy, I know. I just wanted to let you know up front. I'll still demonstrate how to navigate the websites that we're going to talk about today, but then it'll be up to you to finish the assignment using that demonstration and the stuff that you learn over the course of this lecture. We're doing it this way because in order to practice evaluating resources, the best method that we've got is to evaluate resources out in the wild, which is exactly what that final assignment is going to be. In the meantime, we're going to discuss the reason this evaluation is so important. I'm going to show you a couple methods of evaluation that work for me and are employed by academics and legal minds alike. We're going to talk a little bit about how to know we've done all the research that we can, and then we're going to end off with a cautionary tale about an airplane, get into the demo of today's resource, and say goodbye for the rest of the night. Does that sound good? I can't hear you. So let's get into it. Before anything, I think it very pertinent to discuss why we need to evaluate our sources in the first place. I, like many people, would like to think that we live in an honest and just world. Life would be a lot simpler if that were the case, but alas, that is not the world that we live in. For whatever reason, some people feel the need to lie. And now, don't get me wrong, that is not a moral judgment of any kind. There's plenty of valid social reasons to employ dishonesty in our day-to-day lives, but not here. Not when it comes to sourcing information for your clients. You owe them a duty of competence, and you cannot lie your way through that. Unfortunately, though, you will encounter sources and materials that have latched onto a lie for whatever reason, and it comes in a few different flavors. As I hope you can tell from my clever little title, we've got misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And now the differences between these might seem like they don't really matter, and they kind of don't, but it can help us when we're evaluating our resources because it can give us an insight into why the person that put this together saw fit to tell a fib on the internet. It can tell us whether the lie was intentional or just an honest mistake, which we can then consider when we're deciding whether to use a specific source or whether to discount it completely. So first up, we've got misinformation, which is when someone makes unintentional, sometimes honest mistakes. This can be as simple as providing an inaccurate photo captions, inaccurate dates, bad statistics, or just bad translations. It can also happen when someone misunderstands satire or takes it to mean something other than the criticism that it is. Especially on the internet, important social cues like tone are lost, and it can be hard to decipher with certainty whether something is a joke and was intended to be a joke or not. And that misinterpretation can be spread around in the form of misinformation. Now, when you come across a source that's engaged in this kind of bad info, it's important to continue reading further and check if this is an isolated incident before you completely scrap the idea of using the source altogether. Next, I want to talk about malinformation, which may seem like I skipped the one in the middle, but I promise we will get back to that in a second. Now, malinformation is what happens when someone deliberately and consciously changes the context of a thing to make it seem like something else. It can also happen when someone publishes private information to try to skew data in their favor. While the information published might be true, changing the context around it can make it seem like the intentions were different from the beginning. A good, if very triggering example of this is something like revenge porn. While what is described or shown might have actually taken place, the publisher of that information has deliberately changed the context to seem as though the publication was the goal instead of a personal message with personal significance. which for the record is uncool and bad, and don't ever do shit like that. But last up, we have disinformation, which is an unfortunate combination of the two others that we talked about already. Disinformation is what happens when someone deliberately and consciously manipulates content or intentionally creates false information. Can you see how it can kind of be in both camps at the same time? Like, let's say a random user posts a satire that's then taken literally by someone else, who then goes on to use that misinformation to create further false content and false information. Or another example would be a different random user posts something with the context rearranged, and that would then give our unnamed antagonist ammo to create further false rumors or deliberately fabricated content. It's like playing telephone with faulty information. But either way, all three of these forms of information exist in droves on the internet. I cannot state that enough. It's a pretty spooky place sometimes, and it's important to sift through that information to figure out whether a source is trustworthy or if it's a deliberate act that's created with the express purpose to fool. If we find a source with honest mistakes, it's much easier to forgive and continue searching than if we had found info that was deliberately changed or fabricated just to prove a point. So that's what we're working against when we're looking for information that hasn't been previously vetted. But thankfully, there's a couple methods we can use to figure out whether the sources we find on the internet are trustworthy and worth our time as legal professionals. So let's get into the first method of evaluation. Called the radar test, this stands for rationale, authority, date, accuracy, and relevance. But those are just abstract concepts, so allow me to elaborate. Starting with rationale, in this context, rationale is basically just another word for purpose. We want to know what the purpose is behind a source, because not only can we run into our friend Miss Dismal's kind of information, but we also run the risk of running into bias, as we might each know from experience. Our experiences color our worldview, and our worldviews in turn color our experiences. It's a running loop. But this isn't ethics or philosophy, so we won't get into specifics. What you need to know is that it's always possible and in fact expected that a source might be biased based on the author's worldview. The author may also be biased in their reasoning for posting this information in the first place. While some sources may seem kind of ambiguous, nothing is completely objective, so it's important to analyze a site's purpose when determining its trustworthiness. The questions you should be asking yourself are, why did the publisher make this information available? Is there any obvious or extreme bias immediately visible? Do the authors present more than one viewpoint, or is that just a single viewpoint? Is there anything missing or omitted from this source? If the writing becomes emotionally charged, why do you think that happened in this particular source? And what tone are the authors presenting this information in? All of that's incredibly important to try to figure out rationale. Next up, we have authority. What we want to know is what gives the author the authority to speak on the subject, especially in the case of legal research. Whose interpretations would you trust more? Would you trust a farmer's, or would you trust a seasoned legal professional's? And no hate to farmers, I just don't think they teach legal reasoning in farmer school, but I could be wrong. The questions you should be considering are the author's credentials and how the author is related to the topic that you're researching. You should be looking into whether the author is affiliated with any organizations, and if they are they reputable organizations? What else can you find on the internet about this particular author? What else has this author published? And is the publisher even a valuable source? Great questions. Next up, we've got date, or another word for that would be currency. It's important to note that, especially in the world of legal information, things can become outdated very fast. New legal dogmas are being created and updated every day, so you want to make sure your information is up to date. And not everything we do in legal research is going to be super current, though. Sometimes we have to reach research older materials, so it's important to pay attention to the time period something was published in and the date involved in your own research questions, so you know that you've got updated information for the time. The questions you should be considering are: when was this info published? When was it last updated? Is the stuff referenced within this source also up to date? Is your topic one that changes at like lightning speed, or can there be millennia between big changes? Could there be newer information out there? All that kind of good stuff. But let's move on to accuracy, which is exactly as it sounds. This is important because we want to make sure we're not lying or making stuff up in the course of our research. We want to keep our own credibilities intact, I'm sure. Questions that you should consider here are whether you're seeing any statements you know immediately to be false. Was any of this information reviewed beforehand? And how was it reviewed beforehand? Was it reviewed by peers? Was it reviewed by experts? Do the citations and references support the claim that the author is trying to make, or is the author misinterpreting something? What does everybody else say on this topic? What do all the seasoned professionals say on this topic? Is this like a fringe idea, or is this backed by many, many others? If there's stuff like pictures, you want to ask, why are they there? And are they accurate? Reverse image search is great for this specific thing. And especially, we want to ask something like, what is the domain that this information was found on? Is it .net, .edu? By the way, be wary of multiple domain endings. I know the joke is like something .co.uk, it's hilarious or whatever. But some websites will pass themselves off as reputable only to add that extra amending domain at the end. Like occasionally you'll see .co.com and it's straight up just to fool you. So be wary of that. Lastly though, we have relevance. Relevance matters because you want to make sure you're not just finding good information, you want to make sure it supports your ideas and isn't some random extra information that doesn't help you further your research at all. A good example I found was a source on Einstein's married life, for instance. That wouldn't be super relevant to a paper about his scientific achievement of, the theory of relativity. But the questions you should be considering are whether the information even answers your question, whether it meets your criteria for the research that you're doing. Is the source too technical? Is it too simple? Who is the intended audience for this source? And does it add to your knowledge of the subject? Or does it just restate what you already know? Now, all of these questions and this entire test serves to further your insight into a source and decide whether it's right for you. So when you find your sources, pay close attention to the things that I just mentioned. And now we're going to look at a very similar, if very unfortunately named, test. Now, if you took my course on free and low-cost legal resources, this might seem very familiar. This test is unfortunately called the CRAP test, but at least it will be very hard to forget. So CRAP stands for Currency, Relevance, Authority, Accuracy, and Purpose. Very similar to the last one. So let's talk about each of those in a bit of detail before we move on. When we talk about currency, what we're asking is whether the information is timely or not. When you're evaluating the currency of your source, you should be asking things like when the information was published, how long ago it was published, and you should be looking into when the information was last updated or revised, and whether the information is current or out of date for your topic. We talked about this a second ago, and it sounds easy in theory while we have the big three databases on our side in law school. But y'all won't be able to do that after you graduate. You won't have those three databases forever. So you're gonna need to find other methods of comparing the currency of a certain website's information. In the case of legal research, you could try looking into government or educational websites to find what you need. The point is you have to verify that the information that you found is current and timely, and that it hasn't been sitting around untouched for like 30 years. That is how we end up relying on severely outdated law, and we don't want that. Next up is relevance, which is really asking about the importance of the information for your particular needs. When evaluating a source, you should be asking whether the information you found is even related to the topic or question you need an answer for. It's not often that this will happen, but sometimes the law shares terms with the scientists because of Latin. And you may end up finding something that seems to be talking about your obscure Latin law term, when in reality it's referencing some obscure Latin science fact that has nothing to do with you. So be wary of that. You should also be asking questions about the source, like who is the intended audience of this source, and is it serving your needs as a law professional? There's many resources you're going to find that are geared towards the public, but it will be a little too simplified or elementary for us law professionals that have trained on this information for many, many years. If the information is too simplified, you may miss important key details in your research. Another question to be asking here is how many sources you have found so far and how the information you found differs from source to source. So which one is more in depth and which one is more simplified? And which one, most importantly, which one would you be comfortable citing in your practice? Next up, we have authority, which more simply asks, who put this here? Who put this here? Who is the author or publisher of this work? What are their credentials? And what are their motives? When it comes to things like government websites, you can be pretty sure that their motives are likely to comply with the need for public access to information, and you can assume good objective information. But sometimes you will come across independent law blogs that may have a different motive for putting together this kind of information. And I'm not naming names or pointing fingers, but it is possible that a law blog would simplify a complex legal scenario in a blog post to entice people with said problem to call their firm for guidance. Just something to keep in mind. And also, since most of our research is going to be on the computer, be thinking about your URLs you see pop up attached to your sources. Does the URL reveal anything about the author of the source? Is it for commercial use, educational use, nonprofit use? Keep that in mind when you're browsing. Next, we have accuracy. This questions the reliability, the truthfulness, the correctness of the material that we have found within our sources. When it comes to legal materials, you're often going to find reprints of a different codified law, which doesn't allow a whole lot of wiggle room for outright lying. But what it does leave is the possibility of typos or accidentally omitted text or even misinterpretations when you're looking at things like secondary sources. When you're evaluating your source, be looking around for signs of typos or sentences that don't quite flow right, as if something is missing. It's possible that in reprinting the information, something critical has been lost. Because of this, though, it's important to check the information you find against other sources so you can be sure you're getting accurate and complete information. Lastly, in this test, we have purpose. We started with purpose, we're ending with purpose. You want to be asking why this information exists in the context in which you found it. What is its purpose at all? Is it to teach? Is it to sell? Is it to entertain you? And does your source make its purpose clear? Often when you find a low-cost database, it's going to be run by a group of people with a specific mission in mind. But the point is, it will be obviously stated that they've put this information online freely for a specific and concise purpose. When you cannot find the purpose behind something being available online, it really starts to call into question both the authority and the accuracy of the source. So be on the lookout for all that. Now, despite its unfortunate name, CRAP is a pretty good method for evaluating all the research resources that we find, because it allows us to make sure that we're getting updated, relevant, informed, accurate, and objective information about our topic, which is exactly what we need, whether we're looking for just a reprint of codified law or some form of secondary explanation of it. Both tests seem kind of similar, and they're basically the same thing. But you might get different insights from doing both, so I implore you to try doing both. But after all of that repetitive vetting strategy information, I bet you're wondering, when can I be done? At what point can I trust the information that I've gathered? And my sweet friends, the answer has been with you all along. When you're doing this kind of research and you do all your cross-checking and have decided that you have the full picture, you're done. You've successfully done it. Congrats! It's very similar to the same principle in more generalized legal research. When you keep finding all the same information at all the same depth, when you keep getting led back to the same sources, you've done it. And you can write your memo or your brief knowing you've done a good job. But speaking of doing a good job, I want to give you all a warning. I'm sure you're all aware of artificial intelligence, and more specifically, I'm sure you're all aware of the large language models that seem to be able to do anything, including writing your essays for you. But there's some important things that you need to know before you can responsibly engage with prompt models like ChatGPT when you're doing legal research, especially when you're doing it without our big three databases. So first off, the legal research process is quickly advancing due to the integration of AI into the tools that we use to do it. So, well, I'm sure you've heard of ChatGPT, Google Gemini, or even freaking Bing Chat. AI has been integrated into more specific legal research tools. The major legal research databases have already integrated artificial intelligence into their searching functions, which to the responsible researchers I know you guys to be, should sound off some alarm bells. And more than just their searching functions, the big databases have already integrated whole AI assistants that can pull all the research you could ever want. And to the responsible researchers, I know you are, this should be making your head spin. Westlaw Precision, for instance, uses AI to curate responses to search queries and try to give you the results it thinks are best for you. It's a people pleaser. It's trying to give you what you want. But an unfortunate side effect of that is that if your queries aren't laser focused, or if they're just more general in nature, it can effectively hide results from you as it tries to curate a good response. And more to the point, AI are trained on human data, and every person has a different point of view and a different experience of the world that is often knowingly or otherwise trained into the technology that we use. Although it might seem innocuous or objective, AI models have biases we're not always aware of or privy to, so it's incredibly important to be aware of that fact when using AI in any capacity. And that isn't to say that there aren't any benefits of using technology for legal research, though. It can help us be more efficient with our word choice, for instance. It can help our ability to comprehend and be comprehended in our writing. And it can present us with new ideas we hadn't previously considered. But then again, we don't know how those results are being generated. And in the case of dedicated legal research platforms, results are generated by AI that are owned by huge corporations that likely have their own points of view and motivations that we cannot know. And that's just what's happening right now. We have no idea what the future is going to hold, nor how our legal databases in the wider world in general will continue advancing alongside AI. So not only is it important that you learn how to ethically interact with AI, it's absolutely imperative that you do. But if that isn't enough to persuade you towards ongoing critical analysis of AI and their complex machinery, let me tell you a little story about what happens when you blindly trust AI's results. Stop me if you've already heard this one. But once upon a time, there was a man named Roberto Mata, and he sued an airline called Avianca Airlines, insisting that he was injured when a metal serving cart struck his knee during a flight to Kennedy International in New York. Now, Avianca's lawyers, the airline's lawyers, asked the Manhattan federal judge to toss out the case because there wasn't really any precedent. There wasn't really any reason to rule in Mata's favor. But Mr. Mata's lawyers submitted a 10-page brief citing more than half a dozen relevant court decisions with names like Martinez versus Delta and Zeekr versus Korean Air. And can we guess, based on the content of this slide, what happened in this case? Yeah, nobody, not the airline's lawyers or the judge himself, could find the decisions or the quotations that were cited in and summarized in that brief. And that was because ChatGPT invented all of it. When this happens and generative AI makes stuff up on its own, it's called a hallucination. In this case, Mr. Mata's lawyers used ChatGPT in their legal research, but they neglected to fact-check the AI and introduced completely fabricated information to the court. And can we guess what happened to the lawyers after that? Yeah, the lawyer who used ChatGPT and created the brief completely had to throw himself on the mercy of the court, begging, crying, prostrate on the ground, saying in a sworn affidavit that he used the AI program to do his legal research, which ultimately proved itself to be unreliable. The judge said that he had been presented with an unprecedented circumstance, saying that the submitted brief was full of bogus judicial decisions with bogus quotes and bogus internal citations. I love when judges use fun language. Then he ordered a hearing to discuss potential sanctions for the lawyer. In other words, that lawyer was in big, big trouble, just for blindly trusting AI to do his work for him. And there's a reason the lawyer in the Avianca case got in that big trouble. You guys know that lawyers have a very strict ethical code that they have to follow in their practice. And if you've already taken professional responsibility, you know about this front to back. It's in Rule 1.01, Comment 8 in the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct. You must maintain the requisite knowledge and skill to be a lawyer. A lawyer should keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice, including the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. So that means in order to meet this duty, you have to understand the legal research process top to bottom. And you have to be able to demonstrate your ability to conduct legal research on your own, because you have to be able to vet the AI. So as a result of this case, and generative AI in the news in general, people like Judge Brantley Starr of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas had updated their judge-specific requirements to include a section titled Mandatory Certification Regarding Generative Artificial Intelligence. Specifically, this judge orders that all attorneys appearing before a court file a certificate attesting that either no portion of any filing will be drafted by generative AI, or that any language drafted by generative AI will be checked for the accuracy by a human being. This is precedent setting in its entirety. This certification is one of, if not the first of its kind, establishing the appropriate use of AI in legal proceedings, which is an issue lawyers and law professors are currently troubleshooting. And that's what I've been trying to say this whole time in big fancy words and all these quotation mark hand movements. Please be very careful with AI right now. It might seem like it can give you all the answers, but sometimes it will just straight make stuff up. And if you're not evaluating the results, you might very well lose your license. And we don't want that. You're paying all this money for it. So please be very, very careful, especially when trying to do legal research without the big legal databases. So instead of using AI, where's somewhere that we can go that would give us nice previously vetted results? Ta-da! It's Google Scholar and Google Advanced Search. I know we've warned you about using Google in the past, especially because the results algorithm in the recent past has become incredibly abysmal. But when you have nothing else, you can absolutely still use Google, as long as you know how to use it well. I know you all have used Google Scholar, or at least Google's Advanced Search in the past, probably in high school or even in undergrad. But we're going to do it again anyway, and here's why. From what we know about the internet, we know domains give us a bunch of information regarding who is publishing certain bits of information, and that gives us insight into what the motive behind it might be. And Google Scholar specifically only indexes resources that come from those reputable domains. They index peer-reviewed journals, books, conference papers, dissertations, and even some court opinions. So this will be great for when we no longer have access to the big three databases. And if all else fails, if Google cannot provide you what you need and you keep coming up short, or if for some reason you love to do things the old-fashioned way, You can always go to your local law library and ask for help. Law librarians, me, we're literally trained to find this kind of thing. I went and did more school after law school so I could learn how to research without the databases and find the things lawyers and judges need. So if nothing else, go talk to your local law librarian. They'll either point you in the right direction or find the thing that you need outright. A humble brag. And that's about all I had for the lecture. But first things first, and last things last, before we end for the night, I'm going to jump over to Zoom and show you guys a quick demonstration of how to use Google Scholar and how to use Google's advanced search function. Like I said, I know you've probably already seen it. I know you've probably already done it in high school and undergrad, but we're going to go over it again just in case. So I'll see you on Zoom.
Okay, so welcome to Zoom. This is the part that's going to be really, really easy. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. We're going to start over here with a regular Google search. So this might have changed a little bit from when you guys first did this, or last did this, I should say. But the way that I used to do it when I was working on Google when I was like in high school and undergrad, there used to be an advanced search option right here in the toolbar, in the search bar. But there is no longer, or at least not one that I can see or find. So this is how we're going to be doing our advanced searching on Google from here on out. Or at least this is how we access the advanced searching worksheet on Google. We have to start with a search. We have to already know what we're searching for in order to get to that form. So just for funsies, I'm going to search like property law. That's really expansive and I wouldn't suggest you ever do that, but just for the sake of the demonstration. Property law. So we're going to get a whole bunch of random results we're not even going to pay attention to because what we want to get to is the advanced search form. Here, where it's got all images, news, videos, etc., we're going to go all the way to this corner and hit tools. Once we hit tools, we're going to see that we can filter by time, by results, and then we have the advanced search form here. So we click on that and it will take us to this particular form. Once you get here, what I want you to really focus on is down here, we're looking at site or domain. Now, we could, continue to refine our search so we wouldn't get just everything on property law, but we're not going to do that right now. What we're going to do here is we're just going to type in .edu because what we want is educational domain results for a property law search. So we're going to hit advanced search. And then we're going to see that we're only going to be getting .edu, 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 .edu. We're going to limit our site search to finding .edus. Now you can do multiple of these if you wanted to look for .edu, .net, whatever. You could do that. But especially in your assignment, you're going to be doing them one at a time. So that's how you're going to engage with that advanced search form. And now let's go to, oh God, really bright, really fast. Okay, now we're going to go to Google Scholar. And Google Scholar is very much the same. What we can do is we can start with just a property law search. And it will start to give us more academic related results, right? But we can still on Google Scholar do a site limited search. So we would just have to do that manually. Instead of searching property law, we would also have to add, I don't know if you saw it when we went over here, we would have to add this little ending bit. So let's just copy paste that over here. Now, I experimented a little bit just to see if it worked, but I couldn't get it to work when putting it in parentheses. So like Boolean searching specifically like that doesn't seem to work on Google Scholar. So we're going to have to leave it just like this. But once we click on that, we are going to further limit our results to .edus. And that is how we do that on Google Scholar. So that's about it for the demonstration. It was really short and painless, but I didn't have a whole lot to show you, especially not for your assignment. So go off into the world and figure out the assignment, my sweet friends, and I will see you back at the PowerPoint.
And that's a wrap for this lecture. So go off into the world, my friends, and figure out the assignment. Thank you for hanging out with me at this Excellence in Legal Research Evaluating Your Research lecture. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any concerns, or if you have a picture of a really cool rock that you want to show me for absolutely zero extra credit, you can email me here or ask for me at the library. Good luck with your assignment, and I hope y'all have a great semester. Bye-bye.